The city never really slept, but from where he stood, it almost felt like it did. High above the restless hum of Los Angeles, Keanu Reeves leaned against the glass wall of his home, watching headlights drift like slow-moving constellations beneath him. The world moved on, endlessly, predictably. People chasing something, dreams, money, meaning. He understood that chase better than most. He had lived it, survived it, and somehow, improbably, risen beyond it. And yet, standing there in the quiet, none of it felt like enough. Fame had a strange way of distorting reality. To the outside world, his life was a mosaic of success, films that defined generations, a reputation built not just on talent, but humility. He was admired, respected, even loved by millions who had never met him. But admiration was a distant thing. It didn't sit across from you at dinner. It didn't fill the silence when the night stretched too long. He exhaled slowly, his reflection staring back at him, familiar, but distant. There was always something behind his eyes, something unspoken. Loss had carved its mark into him over the years, quiet but permanent, the kind of loss that didn't scream, but lingered, reshaping everything. He had learned to live with it, or at least to carry it. The room behind him was still. Minimalist, intentional, nothing unnecessary. It wasn't emptiness. It was control. When life had taken so much unpredictably, control became a kind of refuge. A faint sound broke the silence. A knock. Keanu turned, brow slightly furrowed. He wasn't expecting anyone. He rarely did. The second knock was firmer this time, echoing softly through the space. He moved toward the door, each step unhurried but deliberate. When he opened it, no one was there, just a single envelope on the ground, plain, unmarked. For a moment, he simply stared at it. Something about it felt off. Not threatening, not urgent, but deliberate. As if it had been placed there with purpose, not dropped or forgotten. He bent down, picking it up between his fingers. No postage, no return address, just his name, written in simple, clean handwriting. Keanu closed the door quietly behind him, the soft click echoing louder than it should have. He turned the envelope, over once, then again, as if expecting it to reveal something more under closer inspection. It didn't. Carefully, he opened it. Inside, there was only one thing, a photograph. He slid it out slowly, his movements instinctively cautious, like someone handling something fragile, though he didn't yet know why. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. 2 children standing side by side, no older than 8 or 9. The image had that faded quality of something decades old, colors softened by time. But then his eyes narrowed. His breath caught. One of the boys was him. There was no doubt. The shape of the face, the eyes, even the subtle tilt of the head, it was unmistakable. A younger version of himself, frozen in a moment he couldn't remember. But it was the other boy that made his chest tighten. Identical. Not similar. Not resembling. Identical. Keanu's fingers tightened slightly around the edges of the photograph, as if grounding himself in something physical might steady the sudden shift inside him. His mind raced, flipping through memories, childhood fragments, scattered images, faces, places. But nothing matched this. He had no brother. He knew that. He had always known that. Hadn't he? He moved slowly toward the couch, lowering himself down without taking his eyes off the image. The silence in the room had changed. It was no longer calm. It was heavy, pressing in from all sides. "Where did this come from?" he murmured, barely above a whisper. The question lingered unanswered. But deeper than that question was Another one. Louder. More unsettling. How could something so significant, something so impossible, exist without him ever knowing? Keanu stared at the photograph, his reflection faintly visible across its worn surface. Two boys stared back at him. One was the man he had become. The other was a mystery that shouldn't exist. And in that moment, something shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. Enough for him to realize that whatever he thought, he knew about his past, might not be the truth at all. He didn't sleep that night. The photograph stayed with him, at first on the table, then in his hand, then resting against his chest as he sat in the dim glow of a single lamp. Hours passed unnoticed. The city outside dimmed and brightened again, darkness giving way to a pale blue morning, but inside time felt suspended, stretched thin between disbelief and something far more unsettling. Keanu had always trusted silence. It had been his anchor through grief, through chaos, through the kind of questions that had no answers. But this silence was different. It wasn't peaceful. It was charged, like the air before a storm. He studied the photograph again. This time, he noticed details he hadn't before. The boys weren't just standing together. They were positioned deliberately. Their shoulders touched, their expressions mirrored, not just in appearance, but in emotion. A kind of quiet seriousness, unusual for children that age. And behind them, barely visible through the faded edges of the image, was a building. Keanu leaned forward slightly, narrowing his eyes. The structure was plain, almost institutional. No sign, no obvious markers. Just a doorway, a window, and a number partially obscured by shadow. Or maybe 11. It was hard to tell. He rubbed his thumb across the surface of the photo, as if the motion might reveal more, might pull clarity from the past, but it remained, stubbornly still, locked in its silence. "Why don't I remember this?" he whispered. That was the part that unsettled him most. Not the existence of the other boy, though that alone defied everything he knew, but the absence within himself. There should have been something, a memory, a feeling, even a fragment. But there was nothing, and nothing, in this case, felt wrong. Keanu stood, restless energy finally pushing him into motion. He walked toward a shelf tucked discreetly along. The far wall, one of the few places in his home that held pieces of his past. Not awards, not scripts, personal things, old photographs, documents, things most people would consider insignificant. He pulled out a small box, worn at the corners. Inside were pieces of a life he rarely revisited. Childhood images, school, records, a few handwritten notes. He sifted through them carefully, each item a quiet echo of who he had been. Every photograph showed him alone, or with his mother, or with people he recognized. Never that boy. His jaw tightened slightly. The absence was too clean, too complete, as if someone had gone through the effort of removing something or someone from the story entirely. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself. "No," he murmured, almost instinctively. "That's not possible." But the thought had already taken root. He returned to the photograph, placing it beside the others, comparing faces, angles, timelines. The resemblance wasn't just close, it was exact. The same child, duplicated. And yet, this version of his life, the one preserved in his own collection, had no trace of it. A quiet unease crept in. Not fear, not yet, but something colder, sharper. Doubt. He moved back toward the window, the morning light now stretching, across the floor in long, pale lines. The world outside carried on as if nothing had changed. Cars moved, people walked. Somewhere, someone laughed. But inside, Something fundamental had shifted. Keanu had spent years making peace with the past, accepting what he remembered, letting go of what he didn't. He had learned not to chase ghosts. But this wasn't a ghost. This was evidence, and evidence demanded answers. His gaze drifted back to the photograph, resting now on the table like a quiet challenge. 2 boys. One life he knew, one life he didn't, and somewhere between them, a truth waiting to be uncovered. He picked up the photo again, this time with a different kind of intent. Not hesitation, not disbelief, resolve. Whatever this was, whoever that boy was, it wasn't an accident. Someone had sent this. Someone wanted him to see it. Which meant one thing. This wasn't the beginning of a mystery. It was the continuation of something that had started long ago, without him even knowing. Keanu slipped on his jacket, the familiar weight settling over him like armor. For years he had lived quietly, letting the world come and go without digging too deeply into what lay beneath. But not this time. As he stepped toward the door, photograph in hand, a single thought echoed in his mind. Clear, undeniable, and impossible to ignore. If this was real, then his life hadn't just been lived, it had been shaped. And somewhere out there was the reason why. The morning air felt different when he stepped outside. Not colder, not warmer, just sharper. As if the world itself had gained an edge overnight, every sound more distinct, every movement more deliberate. Keanu paused just beyond his door, the photograph still in his hand, half expecting something, someone, to be waiting. But the hallway was empty. Of course it was. Still, the feeling didn't leave him. He moved forward anyway. By the time he reached the street, the city had already begun its daily rhythm. Conversations blurred into traffic noise, footsteps into motion. Life unfolded normally, indifferent to the quiet fracture forming beneath his own reality. He slipped the photograph into the inner pocket of his jacket, close enough to feel its presence with every step. It was a subtle weight, but constant. A reminder. He didn't get into his car right away. Instead, he walked. No destination, just movement. There was something about walking that helped him think, helped him listen, not to the noise around him, but to the quieter voice underneath it. The one that didn't shout, didn't panic, but simply noticed. And right now, it was noticing everything. A woman passing by glanced at him, then did a double take. Recognition. He gave a small nod, polite, distant. She smiled, unsure whether to approach, then continued on. Normal. All of it looked normal. But Keanu couldn't shake the thought that something invisible had shifted, that he was now walking through the same world, but seeing it from a slightly different angle, like stepping into a reflection. He stopped at a quiet corner cafe he'd visited countless times before. Familiar faces, familiar smells, the soft hum of routine, the kind of place where nothing unexpected ever happened. That's why he chose it. Inside, the barista greeted him with an easy smile. "Morning." "Morning," Keanu replied, his voice calm, steady, practiced. He ordered without thinking. Coffee. Black. While he waited, his hand instinctively moved to his jacket pocket, fingers brushing against the photograph. The urge to look at it again was almost magnetic, but he resisted for a moment. Instead, he scanned the room. People sat alone, together, working, talking. Lives intersecting in small, ordinary ways. No one here knew. No one could possibly know what he was holding, what it meant. And yet, his eyes lingered on a man seated by the window. There was nothing particularly unusual about him. Mid-30s, maybe. Neutral expression. A cup of coffee untouched in front of him. But he wasn't looking at his phone. Wasn't reading. wasn't doing anything. He was just sitting, watching. Not the room, not the people. Keanu. The moment their eyes met, the man looked away, too quickly. A flicker, subtle, but unmistakable. Keanu didn't react outwardly. Years in the public eye had taught him how to remain composed under attention, but internally, something clicked into place. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. This was attention. Deliberate attention. His coffee was ready. He picked it up, nodding his thanks, then chose a seat. Not too close, not too far. A position where he could observe without being obvious. The man by the window didn't look at him again, at least not directly. But the tension was there, now threading through the quiet space between them. Invisible, but present. Like 2 points connected by something neither had acknowledged. Keanu reached into his pocket. This time he pulled the photograph out. Slowly, carefully. He placed it on the table in front of him, letting it sit there, exposed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a shift, not in the room, in the man. It was subtle, a tightening of the shoulders, a slight pause in his breathing, the kind of reaction most people would miss. But Keanu didn't, and in that instant, certainty replaced doubt. This wasn't random. The photograph, the letter, the silence, even this moment. It was all connected. The man stood abruptly, leaving his coffee untouched. He didn't rush, but there was intention in his movement now, controlled, precise. As he passed by Keanu's table, he slowed, just slightly, just enough. "You weren't supposed to find that," he said quietly, not looking at him. Then he kept walking. Gone. The words lingered in the air long after the door closed behind him. Keanu didn't move, didn't speak, but something inside him had changed again, more sharply this time. This wasn't about the past anymore. It was about something ongoing, something hidden, something that, until now, had stayed just out of reach. He looked down at the photograph, the 2 identical boys staring back at him with silent, unchanging expressions. You weren't supposed to find that. A warning, or a mistake. Keanu picked up the photo, his grip firmer now. Whatever this was, it wasn't buried, it was active. And someone out there knew exactly what it meant, which meant one thing. He wasn't just searching for answers anymore. Someone was watching him search. He didn't follow the man. Every instinct told him to. There was still time. The door had barely stopped swinging, but Keanu stayed exactly where he was, seated, unmoving, his coffee cooling untouched beside him. Chasing him would have been predictable, and whatever this was. It didn't feel like a situation where predictability worked in his favor. Instead, he watched the reflection in the cafe window, the faint echo of the street outside, distorted by glass and light. The man was already gone, swallowed by the rhythm of the city as if he had never been there at all. But his words remained. You weren't supposed to find that. Keanu repeated the sentence in his mind, not as a question, but as a statement to be understood. The phrasing mattered, not you shouldn't have found it, but weren't supposed to. That implied structure, expectation, a plan, which meant the photograph hadn't just appeared randomly at his door. It had broken something, some boundary that had been carefully maintained for years, and now that boundary was gone. Keanu finally reached for his coffee, taking a slow sip, grounding himself in something ordinary. The bitterness lingered, sharper than usual, or maybe it just felt that way. His eyes drifted back to the photograph, but this time, he didn't look at the faces. He looked around them, the background, the building. He leaned closer, adjusting the angle slightly to catch the light. There it was again, that faint structure behind the boys, plain, unremarkable. But the more he looked at it, the more it refused to stay ordinary. There was symmetry in its design. Too clean, too deliberate, a door centered perfectly between two windows, the number partially visible again. Not 17, not 11, he tilted the image further. 13, he murmured. The number settled into place with quiet certainty, and suddenly, something stirred in the back of his mind. Not a memory, not fully, but something close to it. A feeling, a hallway. White walls, the faint echo of footsteps. Keanu blinked, pulling back slightly. The sensation vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving behind only the echo of something unfinished. He stared at the photograph again, his pulse slower now, but heavier. "Where is this?" he whispered. Not "what is this?" Where? Because places could be found. Places left traces. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, hesitating only briefly before opening the camera. He snapped a clear image of the photograph, then zoomed in on the background, the building, the number, every detail he could isolate. For a moment, he simply looked at the digital version, cleaner, sharper, and somehow colder. This wasn't just an old memory frozen in time. It was evidence, and evidence could be followed. Keanu stood, leaving the coffee behind this time. No second thoughts, no hesitation. Whatever calm he had started the morning with was gone now, replaced by something more focused, more precise. Outside, the sunlight had fully taken hold of the city, but it didn't feel warm. Not to him. It felt exposing, like a spotlight revealing things that had stayed hidden for too long. He moved through the crowd without really seeing it, his attention turned inward, assembling pieces that didn't quite fit yet. A photograph he wasn't meant to have. A stranger who knew too much, a building with a number that stirred something buried deep in his mind, and a past that no longer felt stable. As he reached his car, he paused again, just briefly. Something caught his eye. Across the street, partially obscured by passing traffic, was a dark vehicle. Parked, engine running. It hadn't been there when he arrived, or maybe it had. The windows were tinted, impossible to see through. For a moment, neither of them moved. The car, or Keanu, the space between them stretched, quiet but charged, like the pause before something breaks. Then, without warning, the vehicle pulled away. Smooth, controlled, gone within seconds. Keanu didn't follow. But this time, he didn't need to, because the message was clear. He wasn't imagining it. Whatever this was, whoever was behind it. They were close. Close enough to watch. Close enough to react. He opened the car door slowly, sliding into the driver's seat. The photograph rested in his lap now, no longer just a mystery, but a key. He looked at it one last time before starting. The engine. 2 identical boys, 1 life remembered, 1 life erased, and somewhere in between, a place marked 13. Keanu started the car, his expression calm, but his eyes sharper than they had been in years. Because now, for the first time, he wasn't just questioning his past. He was going to find it, and whatever was waiting at the end of that search. He had the feeling it already knew he was coming. The drive didn't feel like movement. It felt like alignment. Keanu didn't head home. He didn't call anyone. Instead, he let instinct guide him, something quieter than logic, but sharper than chance. The number stayed with him, not just a number now, a signal. He pulled into an underground parking structure beneath a public records building he hadn't visited in years. It wasn't a place most people thought about unless they had something to prove or something to uncover. Today, it was both. The elevator ride up was silent except for the faint hum of cables and the soft flicker of fluorescent lights overhead. He watched the numbers rise, each floor bringing with it a strange familiarity he couldn't place. When the doors opened, the air felt different. Cooler. Still. The kind of stillness that belonged to places where time didn't move forward. It just stacked. Rows of archives stretched beyond immediate view. Shelves filled with files, boxes, records that documented lives in pieces, births, deaths, transfers, changes, stories reduced to ink and paper. Keanu moved forward slowly, scanning the signage, sections divided by decade, by institution, by classification. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but he knew it would find him. "Can I help you?" The voice came from behind a desk tucked near the center of the room. An older man, glasses resting low on his nose, studying Keanu with polite curiosity rather than recognition. Keanu approached, calm as ever. "I'm looking for records," he said. "Something from the late 70s, possibly tied to a private facility. Number 13. The man frowned slightly, not in confusion, but in recognition. 13, he repeated, tapping a pen lightly against the desk. "We don't catalog by numbers like that." Keanu didn't respond. He simply reached into his jacket and placed the photograph on the desk between them. The man looked down and paused. It wasn't a dramatic reaction. No sudden movement, no gasp, but something shifted behind his eyes, something subtle, but undeniable. "I see," he said quietly. That was all. No questions, no confusion, just understanding. He stood slowly, motioning for Keanu to follow. "Come. With me." They walked deeper into the archive, past the sections labeled and organized, into an area that felt different, less maintained, less visited. The lighting dimmed slightly. The air grew heavier. Finally, the man stopped in front of a narrow aisle tucked between two tall shelves. "These records aren't part of the public index," he said, his voice lower now. "They were supposed to be sealed. Most of them transferred. Some removed entirely." Keanu's gaze sharpened. "Removed?" The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he reached up and pulled down a small, unmarked box. Dust clung to its edges, disturbed only by the act of touching it. He set it on a nearby table. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then the man opened it. Inside were files, but not like the others Keanu had seen. These weren't neatly labeled or categorized. They were fragmented, partial, some pages missing, others blacked out. But one thing stood out immediately, a number stamped in faded ink across the top of multiple documents. Keanu stepped closer. His pulse didn't race. It slowed, focused. "What is this?" he asked. The man hesitated. Then carefully, he chose his words. "It's what's left." Keanu reached into the box, lifting one of the files. The paper felt older than it should have been, like something that had been handled too many times, then hidden away for too long. He opened it. Inside, photographs. Not just one. Several. Children. Different ages, different faces, but in some of them, he saw himself, or someone who looked exactly like him. His grip tightened slightly. "This isn't possible," he murmured. The man finally looked at him directly. "No," he said quietly. "It wasn't supposed to be." Keanu flipped to another page. Notes, observations, clinical language, detached, cold. Subject A demonstrates adaptive behavior under environmental variation. Separation protocol initiated. Successfully. Long-term divergence to be monitored. Keanu stopped reading. The words didn't just inform, they echoed. Something deeper, something buried. "You said these were sealed," Keanu said, his voice steady but sharper now. "Who sealed? Them?" The man hesitated again, but this time the hesitation carried weight. "People who don't like their work being found," he said. Silence settled between them. Then, a sound, soft but distinct, somewhere in the archive. Not the usual creak of a building or distant movement. Footsteps, measured, approaching. The man's expression changed instantly. Not fear exactly, but recognition. Urgency. "They shouldn't know about this," he said under his breath. Keanu didn't look toward the sound. Not yet. Instead, he reached into the box one more time and pulled out a final photograph. This one wasn't like the others. It showed the same building from his photograph, clearer, closer, and above the doorway, fully visible now. The number wasn't just painted, it was engraved. Facility 13. Keanu's eyes narrowed slightly, something settling into place inside him. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and for the first time since this began, he didn't feel like he was searching anymore. He felt like he had just stepped into something that had been waiting, watching, and now closing in. The footsteps didn't rush. That was the first thing Keanu noticed. Whoever was coming wasn't trying to catch them off guard. There was no panic, no urgency in the sound, just a steady, deliberate rhythm. The kind of pace that assumed control, the kind that didn't need to hurry. Keanu slowly closed the file in his hands, placing it back into the box with quiet precision. Around him, the air felt tighter now, as if the archive itself had begun holding its breath. The man beside him, who had seemed composed just moments ago, shifted uneasily. His eyes flicked toward the aisle, then back to Keanu. "You need to leave," he whispered. Keanu didn't move. Instead, he picked up the photograph of the building again, Facility 13, and studied it one last time, committing every detail to memory. The structure, the angles, the faint shadow cast across the entrance. It wasn't just a place anymore, it was a destination. The footsteps stopped. Silence followed, a different kind of silence this time. Not empty, but occupied. Then a voice, calm, even, almost polite. "You've gone further than expected." Keanu turned. At the end of the aisle stood a man in a dark suit. Nothing about him stood out, and that was exactly what made him noticeable. Average height, neutral expression. The kind of face that blended into any crowd and stayed forgotten. Except now, he wasn't blending in. Now, he was the only thing that mattered. The older archivist stepped back slightly, instinctively distancing himself. "I didn't—" he began, but the man in the suit raised a hand gently. "That won't be necessary." His attention shifted fully to Keanu. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was something strange about the way the man looked at him. Not with curiosity, not even with concern, recognition, but not the kind you give a stranger, the kind you give a result. "You received something that wasn't intended for you," the man said. Keanu's gaze didn't waver. Someone intended it. A faint smile touched the man's lips. Not amusement, acknowledgement. "Yes," he said. "That's the complication." The word lingered, complication, as if Keanu himself wasn't the problem, just the disruption. Keanu took a step forward, subtle but deliberate. "What is Facility 13? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced briefly at the box of files, then back at Keanu. "You're asking the wrong question." Keanu's expression didn't change. "Then give me the right one." Pause then. "Why were there two of you?" The words landed differently, not as information, as confirmation. Keanu felt it. Not shock, not confusion, but something deeper aligning. A question he hadn't fully formed yet. suddenly given shape. "Start talking," Keanu said quietly. The man studied him for a moment longer, as if measuring something invisible. Then he sighed, soft, controlled. "This was never meant to reach this point," he said. "The separation was successful. The divergence was exceptional." Keanu's jaw tightened slightly. "Stop speaking in fragments." The man tilted his head slightly, considering him. "You lived your life," he said. "That was the objective. Independent development, environmental influence, identity shaped by experience." "And him?" Keanu asked. A beat. Then, "Also successful." The words were too clean, too detached. Keanu took another step forward. "He has a name." "Yes," the man replied, "but that's not what he was given." That was the first crack, small, but real. Keanu caught it instantly. He wasn't just separated, he said slowly. He was placed. The man didn't respond, didn't deny it either. Silence filled the space between them, and in that silence, the truth began to take shape on its own. "You created this," Keanu continued. "Both of us." The man's expression remained calm, but his eyes shifted just slightly. "Not created," he corrected. "Selected." The word hit harder than anything else. Selected, as if lives weren't lived, but chosen, arranged, directed. Keanu felt something rise in his chest. Not anger, not yet, but pressure. The kind that builds when too many pieces fall into place at once. "Why?" he asked. "This time," the man answered, "because identity is the one variable no one has ever been able to control," he said. "Nature versus nurture. Potential versus outcome. You weren't just participants." He gestured lightly between them. "You were proof." Keanu's eyes didn't leave him. "Of what?" The man stepped forward slightly, closing the distance just enough to make his presence unavoidable. "That environment doesn't just shape a person," he said quietly. "It decides who they become." A long pause followed. Then Keanu spoke again, calm, but sharper now. "And if I don't like the answer?" For the first time, the man's expression changed. Not fear, not concern, something colder. "Then you're asking a question that was never part of the experiment." The air shifted again. The archivist behind them had gone completely still. And somewhere, deeper in the building, a door closed. Heavy, final. Keanu didn't look away, didn't step back, because now it was clear. This wasn't just about the past. This wasn't just about a brother. This was about something much bigger, something designed, controlled, and hidden for years. And whatever it wasn't finished yet. The silence after that statement didn't feel empty. It felt like a decision waiting to be made. Keanu didn't respond right away. He watched the man in front of him, not just listening to the words, but studying the space between them, the pauses, the restraint, the way every sentence felt measured, like it had been rehearsed long before. This moment ever arrived. That meant one thing. This wasn't improvisation. This meeting was expected. "You said the separation was successful," Keanu finally said, his voice steady but quieter now. "That implies there was a risk it wouldn't be." The man's gaze flickered, just briefly, but it was enough. "There's always risk," he replied. Keanu shook his head slightly. "No, not like this. You didn't just separate two lives. You erased one from the other completely." His eyes hardened. "That's not risk. That's control." The word hung there. Control. The man didn't deny it this time. Instead, he took a slow breath, as if adjusting something internally. "You're interpreting this emotionally." Keanu let out a faint, humorless exhale. "You're avoiding it clinically." Another pause. Then something shifted. Not in Keanu. In the man. For the first time, there was the slightest crack in his composure, not visible to most, but unmistakable to someone paying close attention. "You weren't supposed to question it," he said. There it was. Not just a statement, an admission. Keanu's eyes narrowed. "Then you don't know me as well as you think you do." The man held his gaze, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, yes, but something deeper, too. Uncertainty. That was new. Keanu stepped closer to the table, placing both hands lightly against its surface. "You've been watching me," he said. "Monitoring, measuring. Whatever word you prefer." The man said nothing. "That means you already have your results," Keanu continued. "So why step in now?" A longer pause this time, the kind that wasn't planned. Finally, the man answered, "Because variables have started to overlap." Keanu didn't blink. "You mean him?" "Yes." The single word carried weight. "He knows," the man added. That changed everything. Keanu straightened slightly, the shift almost imperceptible, but inside, something locked into place. "Knows what?" he asked. "That he was part of something," the man said carefully. "Not everything, not yet, but enough to start asking questions." Keanu's voice lowered. "And that's a problem for you." "It's a problem for the structure," the man corrected. "The integrity of the outcome depends on separation. Always has." "And now that's gone," Keanu said. The man didn't respond. He didn't need to. Keanu glanced down at the open box again. The scattered files, the fragmented records, the pieces of something that had been carefully hidden and were now unraveling faster than anyone could contain. "You didn't expect us to find each other," Keanu said. "No," the man admitted, "but you planned for the possibility." Another pause, this time longer, more deliberate. Then, "Yes." Keanu's expression didn't change, but something in his posture did. A subtle tightening, a readiness. "What does that mean?" he asked. The man reached into his coat slowly, not in a threatening way, but in a way that made the air shift all the same. He pulled out a small, thin folder. Unlike the others, this one was intact, clean, untouched by time. He placed it gently on the table between them. "This," he said, "is what happens next." Keanu didn't open it immediately. He looked at the man instead. "You're just handing this over?" "I'm not handing it over," the man replied. "I'm acknowledging that you were always going to get here." That sentence landed differently. Not resistance, not control. Something closer to inevitability. Keanu finally reached for the folder, opening it slowly. Inside, no photographs. No scattered notes, just a single document, structured, precise. At the top, a title. Phase 2, Convergence Protocol. Keanu's eyes moved down the page, scanning quickly at first, then slowing as the meaning settled in. "Convergence," he murmured. He looked up. "You didn't just separate us," he said. "You planned for us to come back together." The man met his gaze evenly. "Yes." Keanu's grip tightened slightly on the folder. "Why?" The answer came without hesitation this time. "Because separation tells you what environment creates," the man said. "But convergence..." He paused, just briefly. "Convergence tells you what can't be erased. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable." Keanu felt it then. Not just the weight of the past, but the shape of what was coming next. This wasn't the end of something hidden. It was the beginning of something designed. "And what happens when we converge?" Keanu asked quietly. "For the first time since this began?" The man didn't have a clean answer. Instead, he said something far more unsettling. That, he replied, is the part we never got to test. Somewhere in the distance, a faint sound echoed again. Movement, doors, something shifting beyond the walls of the archive. But inside that narrow aisle, everything had already changed. Keanu looked back down at the document in his hands. Phase 2. Not a discovery, not an accident, a continuation, and whatever came next wasn't just about finding his brother anymore. It was about what would happen when they finally stood face to face. Not as strangers, not as experiments, but as something no one had ever seen before. For a long moment, Keanu didn't move. The document remained open in his hands, but he wasn't reading it anymore. He was feeling it, every word, every implication, settling into something heavier than thought. Convergence protocol. It sounded clinical, controlled, but nothing about this felt controlled anymore. Not to him. Where is he? Keanu asked. The question cut through the silence with a clarity that changed the room. No hesitation, no detours, just direction. The man in the suit watched him carefully. Closer than you think. That wasn't an answer. Keanu closed the folder slowly. You've been watching both of us, he said. Tracking, measuring, guiding. His eyes sharpened. So don't pretend you don't know exactly where he is. The man exhaled quietly, as if weighing something. Then he nodded. Once. There's a place, he said. Not on any current registry. It used to be part of the original program. Decommissioned, officially. Facility 13, Keanu said. Yes. The word didn't echo, it settled. Keanu slipped the folder under his arm and picked up the photograph again, holding it beside the man's line of sight. This is where it started, he said. So this is where it ends. A faint shift crossed the man's expression. Not disagreement, not approval, recognition. You won't be alone when you go there, he said. Keanu's gaze didn't waver. I haven't been alone since this started. That landed. For the first time, the man didn't have a response ready. Keanu turned, closing the box of files with quiet finality. The archivist remained frozen near the edge of the aisle, as if unsure whether he was witnessing something important or something he shouldn't survive knowing. As Keanu stepped past him, the older man spoke, soft, almost hesitant. They took more than records, he said. They took pieces, histories, people who asked questions. His voice lowered. Be careful what you find there. Keanu paused just for a second. Then he nodded once and kept walking. The man in the suit followed at a distance, not escorting, not stopping him, just present. Like a shadow that had decided not to hide anymore. They moved through the archive. In silence, the fluorescent lights above flickered faintly as they passed, each step echoing just a little too loudly against the polished floor. At the exit, Keanu stopped, not because he was unsure, because something shifted. It wasn't a sound. Not exactly. More like a feeling pressing in from somewhere just beyond the visible. A subtle awareness, like being watched, but not from behind. From ahead. Waiting. He pushed the door open. The daylight hit harder than before, sharp and immediate. The world outside hadn't changed, but he had. Everything felt more defined now, like the edges of reality had been sharpened. Keanu stepped out onto the street and froze. Across the road, standing perfectly still among the moving crowd, was him. Not a resemblance. Not a similarity. Him. Same. Height. Same posture. Same stillness in the middle of motion. But where Keanu stood grounded, steady, the other man carried something different. A tension. a coiled energy just beneath the surface. His clothes were simpler, worn by life rather than chosen. His gaze wasn't searching, it had already found. Their eyes locked, and in that instant, the world around them seemed to dissolve, not literally, but completely irrelevant. Cars passed, people walked, voices blended into noise, none of it mattered, because standing there, separated by a single street, were two lives that were never supposed to meet. Keanu felt it immediately. Not recognition, not familiarity, something deeper, something instinctive, like looking into a reflection that didn't mirror you but understood you. The other man took a single step forward, not hesitant, not aggressive, certain. Keanu didn't move, didn't need to. The distance between them wasn't measured in steps anymore, it was measured in years, in choices, in lives that had unfolded in completely different directions, only to collide here, now, in a moment that felt both impossible and inevitable. Car passed between them, briefly breaking the line of sight, and when it cleared, he was closer. No rush, no drama, just closer. Keanu's grip tightened slightly around the folder under his arm. Convergence protocol. This was it. Not a theory, not a plan, reality. The other man stopped a few feet away. Up close, the differences became clearer. A faint scar along his jaw. Eyes that had seen harder things. A posture that carried weight Keanu didn't recognize, but somehow understood. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, "You got the picture," the man said, his voice identical, but edged, sharper, like something shaped under pressure instead of peace. Keanu held his gaze. "You sent it." A faint smile, brief but real, took you long enough. There was no hostility in it, but no warmth either, just truth. Keanu studied him, every detail, every subtle difference, every impossible similarity. "What's your name?" he asked. The man tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question itself. Then he answered, "Not the one they gave me." A pause. Then, "Elias." The name settled between them. Real, grounded, earned. Keanu nodded slowly. I know who you are," Elias interrupted. Of course he did. Silence returned, but this time it wasn't empty. It was full, of everything neither of them had said yet. Everything they didn't understand. Everything that had been taken, shaped, divided. And now, brought back together, Elias glanced briefly at the folder in Keanu's hand. "They finally told you," he said. "Not everything," Keanu replied. Elias let out a quiet breath, something close to a laugh, but without humor. "They never do." Another pause. Then Elias stepped slightly closer, his voice lowering just enough to cut through everything else. "You feel it, don't you?" he said. Keanu didn't answer, didn't need to, because he did. Something beneath the surface. Not memory, not emotion. Something deeper, shared, unexplained, unavoidable. Elias nodded, as if confirming it for himself. "Good," he said quietly. Keanu's eyes narrowed slightly. "Good?" Elias met his gaze, steady, unwavering. "Because that means," he said, "this isn't over." A beat. Then, "It's just starting."